Hello everybody, I just wanted to go ahead and do a very quick overview on the Arcane Mage. Nothing too extravagant, nothing too major. I just wanted to go through some of the core concepts, some of the rotation that I do. Sometimes I feel like it's a little bit better if you actually see what's going on. The numbers that I've been getting as far as my DPS goes, they've been under these kind of pristine kind of circumstances where I'm getting touch of the Magi, I'm only fighting for less than 2 minutes, and I'm having my 3 stacks of arcane missiles. Everything is really just jiving up properly. So I wanted to kind of go through what I've been doing and how I kind of play my character a bit so you guys can see what I do, apply anything that works well to your own rotations, and then hopefully y'all can go ahead and share it back to the community. Maybe I can find something that I'm doing wrong and I can tweak a bit to make better. Just for starters, I do know that right now there is a lot of discussion about whether or not I should have Arcane Rebound and Arcane Resonance, if I should not have taken Touch of the Magi. At the same point, there's Mark of a Luneth and when it should be cast during your burn phase. Whether you do it immediately following the Rune of Power, Arcane Power combo, if you do it just before that, or if you try to jive it up so that only the explosion goes off at that point, and instead just start casting it like right away. So those are things I'm not going to get too big into right now, if at all. I just want to go over the basics of it. The little nitty-gritty things like that we can keep to the actual discussion forum. So with that being said, I'm just going to clear my throat real fast, and I'm going to go ahead and read off a little bit of a, kind of like a guide almost, I guess you could say. I've never done one before, but I'll consider this a small guide. Okay, sorry about that. So, first and foremost, wanted to kind of go through a few little things here. So, don't mind my notes here. I'd rather have them on screen than not. There's been a lot of arguing and discord going back and forth about mastery, versatility, crit, and haste, and what the priority really is. There's really no direct consensus, though. Now, as of the last patch update, which I think was the 27th, if I'm not mistaken, of September, the change to mastery increased the actual point yield that you get. So before it was like 1.5, 2 points equals a percent, whereas versatility was like a 1-for-1 ratio or something of that sort. I'm not sure the exact numbers. But that's the kind of concept. It costs more to get an upgrade in your mastery for the damage done versus versatility. So people were saying go versatility and do the Nether Tempest spam, which has been broken pretty badly. It's still doable, but it's not something I'd personally recommend. It's also a one-button wonder. I don't know how anyone can find that very fun. So, me personally, okay, right now I'm feeling that mastery and versatility are very close to one another. Versatility obviously is just straight damage output, whereas mastery is only going to affect things that use arcane charges. Now, I've had people say that Mark of a Luneth, the actual artifact trait ability, uses arcane charges. I can't find any details that state that. When I look at it, it states that it's using the actual mastery for the amount of mana you have, because it's 15% damage of your maximum mana. So, to me, I feel like that's the only point where mastery really affects that. It's not the damage output as far as like straight damage goes. So, it's one of those ones you can play it either way. Versatility is going to increase the general damage it does. Mastery is going to increase the damage it does. So it doesn't, to me, matter which one you go with. I like to have a little bit of both. Now, obviously, because of the gear that drops and stuff, I try to focus one over the other. I've personally come across more gear that has mastery, versatility, mastery crit, than I've found things that are versatility crit or versatility haste or anything of that sort. So it's mostly been a priority on mastery because that's what I found. So I'm not going to go over all my gear or anything like that. Just to kind of show a quick overview. As of the moment, 852 item level. That's straight out equipped. So 2,000 critical strike points, about 12%. Haste, I'm not concerning myself all too much of that because I'm using quickening. It is beneficial to your ticks for your evocation, your ticks for Nether Tempest, so it's very nice on that end of the spectrum, but that kind of comes with the actual build that I'm going with. So it's not a, hey, I see something with like 900 haste, let me go get that. Mastery, about 11,000 right now. I'm sitting about at 48%. So it's doing good. It's, almost a 50% increase to my mana regen and max mana. So overall, to me, that's going to give more damage output on the Mark of a Luneth, and it's going to give a lot more damage output on my heavy-hitting spells like Arcane Missiles. Things like Nether Tempest, people say it's a heavy-hitting spell. I haven't seen the numbers reflect that. In all of my trials and tribulations, I have only ever seen figures that don't really show Nether Tempest being up there in my top 3 skills. Most of my damage comes from Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, and Mark of a Luneth. So I'm not too concerned about Nether Tempest. Quite frankly, I may even consider swapping out for one of the other talent choices, but more on that later. Versatility, sitting about 11% with a 4,000 point. So overall, it's just a straight extra healing damage. Now, the healing comes into play if you use something like Cold Snap or anything like that. Obviously, that's not the case for most of us, so the healing portion's a little wonky. The damage, though, an extra almost 11% damage, reduces damage by 5%. Oddly enough, it's useful, and a lot of people kind of shun it, like, no, versatility is this horrible thing. Honestly, I look at it this way. 5% damage reduction doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're taking a lot of AoE damage, it stacks up quickly. And I'd rather be alive during a raid boss fight than to be face down, butt up, dead. So, a dead DPS is not useful to anybody. You're already very niche as it is. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of go over real quickly my talent choices and why I've chosen things that I've done, and some alternates that I'm thinking of. So starting with the 15. Okay, you got Arcane Familiar, Presence of Mind, Words of Power. Now, for the longest time, I used to run with Words of Power. And that's because I felt having that extra 4% when you're near the top end of your mana was very nice, because already, ever since Legion's pre-patch hit, it feels like Arcane Missiles don't proc as much as they had in the past. So having that little extra oomph definitely helped out. I think that's just more from my own assurance than anything that I felt that way. I'm still trying to see if the data really reflects. I haven't, at the moment, been tracking it too closely, but I feel like it doesn't matter if I have Words of Power or not, because there's points where I'm blowing out my mana, and when I'm doing that, it kinda doesn't matter. Presence of Mind, it's very niche. I have not found a place to use it yet. Honestly, I haven't even tried it since. I just don't personally find it very useful. Other people may. Some people have issues with movement, and if they do, that may be a perfect thing for them. Arcane Familiar is something that's been suggested by many guides and a lot of different persons on the forums. When I look at it, 10% to my max mana, that's very nice. It doesn't look like it does anything other than that and a little bit of an attack. But 10% to your max mana on top of what your mastery is doing, that's going to give you a lot of mana. I'm already at 1.8 mil, so 15% of that is going into my actual Mark of a Luneth. That's really why you want to take that, in my personal opinion. It just does so much extra damage because of it, and it keeps you in the game a little bit longer. So, the next item, the level 30 talents, I'm looking at things like Shimmer, Cauterize, and Cold Snap. Now, Cauterize, personally, I'm only going to go with that if I know I am at risk of dying. So if I'm in a group with a really bad healer, or a really bad tank, or I'm just having a lot of issues with aggro because of that, I'll go ahead and select it. Honestly, it shouldn't be much of an issue if you're in a decent raid group or a decent dungeon group. So I don't really see the point to having it. It's not super beneficial. Cold Snap, kind of the same way. It has a very niche targeted audience. People that are taking the excessive amounts of damage or need to block damage from happening. It's nice to have the 2 ice blocks. Remember, it does have a cooldown in between. You can't just do one boom and then do another. So, and then this is where the healing comes into effect. It's 3% of your max health every second. So, and I believe it's already a 10-second thing. So that's, what, my math is correct, that's 30%? Yeah, 30%. So, it's not a huge amount, per se, but it goes up more by your versatility. But I'm not really here to talk about my heals and stuff like that, or do math on that end of the spectrum. Shimmer has been invaluable at this point. The reason is it gets you into where you gotta go and then gets you out quickly and easily while you're still casting. I can't tell you how many times I've been there and I'm casting Evocation and I'm like, my quickening's gonna run out. I blink in and then I go ahead and I cast my Arcane Explosion and then I blink back out with Displacement. So as long as you do it right, you'll go ahead and you'll keep casting everything. You can do what you gotta do. It's just overall, it's mobility. Now, the 45 talents, this is where things get a little hairy. Now, I have not done any direct testing with mirror images. I would like to find out what the damage gain and benefit are to having them. They look interesting, they've always been very interesting, but for Arcane, they've never been very functional because they never benefited from your Arcane charges. I haven't seen anything that says that their abilities don't factor in, so I need to go ahead and do some research on that before I can make a true decision. As of right now, though, the main thing is this. Rune of Power, if you know you're going to be able to stand still for a few seconds. Incanter's Flow, if you're in the middle of a fight where you just know you're not going to have the chance to really sit still and do what you got to do. Personal preference, I know some people that just prefer going Incanter's Flow. When you're doing that, set yourself up a weak auras or some type of notification that will tell you when you're at the, nice stack point where you're getting that 20% buff. Otherwise, I wouldn't concern yourself much with it and just let it do its thing. So, level 60, this is where I've had a lot of, people saying, hey, you should, in your artifact talents, go with Arcane Rebound, and then you should also get Resonance to go ahead and really pull in that damage from your Arcane Barrage. And in an AoE monster fight, I think it's pronounced like Il'gynoth or so in Emerald Nightmare, something like that would be fantastic to do that in. I would be all on board with it, because it's all about the ads, and then you got a little bit of a burn phase. So overall, it's fleshing out better. Personally, I've set myself up more to function around single target burning and minor ad control. So that's my own personal build. Everyone's going to have something different. Charged Up, I haven't quite found a solid use for. I was dabbling with it. I didn't quite see it benefiting me all too much, except when I'm in the middle of a dungeon with a group that really doesn't have a care or concern for my mana. When I have a tank that's just boom, 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 they're pulling, they're not waiting, I would rather have Charged Up than the other two abilities, because I can guarantee that I have my 4 arcane charges. I can step out of the battle, I can go invisible, I can eat and drink, get my mana back up, and then, boom, right into the element with the 4 charges like nothing's been missed. But it's very unique scenarios, I'm finding that, so I kind of stepped away from the idea of it. Supernova, I've always loved it. I always thought it was a very cool looking spell. During beta, the thing had a giant explosion, more so than what it currently is. But yeah, I mean, as long as you remember to cast it on a targeted enemy and not yourself by accident, or the tank by accident. I'm not saying I've done that in the past, too many times to count. But there's macros you can set up for that, so it can only go off if you're targeting something that you can attack. But overall, it's just a good burst damage. It works good for AoE. It's more targeted at single target, though, in my opinion, in cleaving. So, and I feel it actually goes well with the artifact talent Touch of the Magi, because it's only a 6-second duration for that actual skill, and you're going to try to pump in as many attacks as you can, and usually when you're down to like the last 0.2 seconds, you try to pop a supernova because it's instant at the target. It's like an arcane blast. It's right there. It doesn't have any travel time. So, and it's a hefty amount of damage that goes into that buildup. For the 75, I used to run around with Ice Ward, and I typically do when I'm out in the world, because being able to just kind of root something, blink away, and run for your life, a lot better. Ring of Frost, I very much dislike it, but that's my own personal opinion. I don't like the idea that I have to cast something and then lead everything through it. It's just like, blah. Personal opinion, though. Personal. Ice Flows is where everyone really likes to really navigate to. Now, I personally have a slight bit of an issue at this point because I've got so many different buttons and so many different hotkeys. I've kind of run out of them at this point. I have it on one of the buttons that I don't really have set to my muscle memory on yet. So I'm finding it where I'm in the middle of casting an ability and I forget to hit that button before I start moving, and then I'm like, I missed it. But that's something I just need to learn to get over. But it's nice being able to cast that, run around, do whatever you got to do with really no worry. So, and it's a short recharge. You got 3 of them. It's basically the way anyone else says it. There should be no reason you're not casting a spell at all times. Pretty much. And I don't disagree with them on that. Level 90, this is where I kind of sit there and I kind of question a lot of the choices that are out there, because nobody's really given a confident choose this over this because of this. So Nether Tempest is where everyone kind of goes to because it's a lot of damage, it's AoE, it's not a huge amount of damage like some of the other abilities you can hit with, but over the 12 seconds it amounts to a good amount of damage. And it increases pretty well with your arcane charges. That's all fine and dandy. You do have to remember to keep it up, and I will not lie about it. There have been plenty of times where I'm so caught up in the middle of doing my burn phase and doing everything else, I have forgotten to reapply Nether Tempest, and I'm losing damage because of that. So the argument then becomes, what is better? Is it better to go with something like Unstable Magic, having that nice 15% chance for an extra 50% damage? Is it better to have Erosion because you're keeping the pressure on that enemy and multiple enemies? Because it does stack easily to multiple enemies if you're doing an Arcane Explosion, which I found, like in Blackrock Hold, dealing with the staircases, phenomenal. I love it because I can just AoE to my heart's content. I don't have to worry about another dot I have to put on things. So, a matter of preference, but I really want to sit down and get some numbers on all of these and see which one yields the best results and try to find out what the difference is. If it's too great of a difference, then yeah, you lean towards one or the other. If it's not too big of a difference, then I think I'll personally go back to Erosion, but time will tell. And then for the level 100, I know a lot of people say go with Arcane Orb. Personally, it doesn't do a lot of damage, and all it's used for is refilling arcane charges. It's almost like a glorified charged up, if you ask me. And it's on a shorter cooldown. Yay, it's fantastic because of that. It does a little damage, short cooldown, and you can get possibly up to 4 stacks if you do it right. In a single target boss fight, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's all too beneficial to me. Overpowered? I personally am not finding myself getting enough arcane missile procs to feel like it is merited. Now, I could argue this. If you're going for a really like extensive burn build, like all builds are going to have some type of burn phase, but it's one of those ones where you're not trying to dump your mana, I could suggest going with Words of Power for your first row talent and then Overpowered for your last, because I think those two go really good hand in hand, because you're trying to get as many arcane missiles, and by getting as many arcane missiles, you're trying to keep your arcane power going. So it's one of those ones, you're going to have to kind of find what works best for you on that. Personally, I'm not a fan of it right now, just because I feel like even with Words of Power, I'm not getting as many arcane missile procs. So, Quickening. Basically, it's your haste. You don't have to worry about haste on gear because you got a talent that gives you haste. Granted, it only goes up to 50 stacks now, and once it hits 50, that's it. It will cast down to 0, and then you got to start fresh again. Now, if I go with the old school, like, Nether Tempest attempt spam, yeah, you hit 50 really quickly. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to get to around 20 to 30 stacks and kind of maintain in that area. So that's how I personally do it. I don't find myself very often getting to 50. Maybe 40s on occasion, but 50 I can barely count on one hand. So that's the talents in my personal nutshell. And I said I wasn't going to go ahead and get really too into detail, and I still ended up doing it. So, shame on me, but this is Rue. I love to go ahead and over-explain things. Alright, so I'm going to get into a little bit of the rotation, then I'm going to actually just show it off, and then I'm going to talk about it, and then it'll be the end of the video at that point. So the original rotation was typically just do whatever you gotta do to get your 4 stacks of Arcane Charge. For most people, that's Arcane Barrage. Or not Barrage, oh god, I am losing my mind today. Arcane Blast! Arcane Blast. So it's using Arcane Blast to get 4 stacks. Now you can use Arcane Explosion if you're in a heavy AoE fight, or if you're really, really desperate to get those 4 stacks faster, because it's only held to the global cooldown. Whereas Arcane Blast, you still have your regular cast time, which is affected by your haste and everything like that. So, I mean, right now it's almost 2.1 seconds cast time off the bat. Yeah, down the line, when you're at like 30 stacks of Quickening, it gets a lot faster than that, but off the bat, you're not going to be that way. So some people like to go ahead and do the Arcane Explosion just to get the stacks real quick, and then go ahead and do the Arcane Blasts. Preference. It's whatever you want to do, whatever you feel is needed for the scenario. By the way, I'm going to say that it's based on your own preferences a lot, and what the scenario calls for. I have seen too many people fail fights because they're locked into trying to do their rotation the way it's supposed to be, standing there taking one heck of a hit, because if they mess up that rotation, they feel like they've let down the entire group. As I go, and what I'll say it once more, if you're dead, you're doing nothing for the group. So, overall, and I'm going to make this quick, you get to 4 stacks of Arcane Charge. Once you're there, the old way that I was doing it was popping Rune of Power, Arcane Power, throwing on Mark of Alunith. If I have Nether Tempest, hitting that. Using Arcane Missiles if they're available. Elsewise, it's Arcane Blast or Explosion, depending how long I have left on Quickening. And then just doing anything I've got available on cooldown, basically. So whether that's Arcane Missiles, Supernova, whatever. The rotation I've been playing with, at the advice of some of the people on the forums there, for the Alter Time forums, was 4 stacks of Arcane Charge, popping Nether Tempest, popping Mark of Alunith, then Rune of Power, Arcane Power, and then doing whatever I gotta do to refresh those Quickening stacks. At that point, it was pretty much just burning whatever I could. So whether it was just spamming Arcane Blast until I had Arcane Missiles, refreshing Nether Tempest, throwing out the Supernovas, whatever I had to do. So, and that's been working pretty good for me. I've gotten up to, I think it was almost a 300, I think it was like 300, 320 range when I was working on a 1.5 minute boss fight out in the world for a world quest. So I feel like I did pretty good there with that. I mean, getting to 300s is pretty solid in my opinion. I don't expect 300s to be your consistent every single time you're doing something, though. Now, the biggest thing I can say with the burn phase is use your judgment as to what's going on and what you need to do. For me, I have Touch of the Magi. Okay, just to show that off real fast what it is. Touch of the Magi is the dragon point on the right-hand side. It takes 20% of the damage you do, okay? And it's kind of like the legendary ring from Draenor. It'll take 20% of the damage you do and then focus it back into that target as a small area effect explosion. Now, it's only a 10% chance for that to happen when you use Arcane Blast, but you're using Blast so often, it goes off pretty regularly. I mean, I've had times where I get it 3 times in a row almost. When I get that, my goal, if I have Arcane Power already going, awesome. If not, I just take it as it is. I don't try to do anything else in between. Nothing that's instant cast that's using a global cooldown. So, I will typically go for as many Arcane Missiles as I can dump into it. Preferably 3, but obviously that may not be the case. So, Arcane Missiles, Arcane Blast, and then at the last, half a second, Supernova. The reason I do that is because Arcane Blast does a lot of damage already. Arcane Missiles does more damage than Arcane Blast, and if you get lucky with the rules of 3, let's say you have 3 of those things banked and ready to go, and you get a Touch of the Magi and you unload them, and 1, 2, or 3 of them get the extra proc, that's immense damage that's going to be loaded in there. Not to mention, if you finalize it with a Supernova for extra damage, that's a nice compressed packet of Doom coming in. That's why I went with this route. I'm trying to focus on single target and taking that enemy down in big, heavy hits. Now, that's what I do. So, I think at this point here, I'm just going to go ahead, I'm just going to show you real quickly what my rotation kind of looks and feels like. I'm going to mute the microphone while I do this, though. Unfortunately, I have a mechanical keyboard, and my microphone's not that far away, so if I start clicking on this thing, you're going to hear it like crazy. So, I'm going to mute the microphone, I'm going to do the rotation. Once I'm done, I'm just going to kind of explain anything that goes on during it, if I made any mistakes, what I picked up on, and I'll show the damage results and things of that sort, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay? So, if you stayed with me this long, awesome. I will talk to you guys in just a moment or two. Here we go. All right. So that is pretty much what I did there. So let's take a look. All right. So I ended that with about 234k DPS. So not my best I've done on it. I know I messed up a few things, especially in the opening there. I actually have my shift page down, which is one of my little keys on my mouse, bound from my arcane power. It didn't actually click the way I wanted it to, which is an issue I've been having. It's more just, honestly, I believe it's just the key combo. I need to find something else to put that on. So because of that, it messed it up in the very beginning there. I know there were a couple times I missed putting down the actual Nether Tempest, and I know on the second burn phase I did things a little out of order by doing the Arcane Power and the Runa Power first and then the Mark of Luna. That's personally just a little issue I have because I'm still in that cycle of cast everything that's going to increase damage and then cast your damaging spells. Whereas that there, the actual ticks don't do as much because it's only 248 over 6 seconds. So it's not a huge amount of tick damage, and I should be trying to let that tick happen before I cast the Runa Power and the Arcane Power. So that's more or less my own fault there than anything. I did clear the quickening stacks with Arcane Barrage when I got to around 30% mana. Just because I want to try to find that sweet spot. I've been finding about 30-40% mana if you do it right. You hit the Arcane Barrage, clear out your stacks, and then at that point it's get to 4 stacks, Arcane Missiles, Nether Tempest, clear. 4 stacks, AM, Nether Tempest, clear. And that's the kind of cycle you get into in that conserve phase. Using Mark of Luneth and Supernova as they come available. I know I missed a couple Supernovas in there when I could have popped them off. I'm still, as I said, it's my own personal flaws there. I'm still getting the hang of having all these extra buttons. But with that being said, one thing I did do just to kind of show it off is when I was casting my evocation that one time, you noticed I blinked forward and I did a arcane explosion and then I displaced back. That is a little trick that I saw online that someone was doing just to make sure that you always have the stacks available, so that way they don't fall off or anything like that, because by the time you cast an arcane blast it's going to fall off if you don't have an arcane missiles ready to go. So that's what I've been doing, just to kind of take a look here. So depending on the fight and how well I keep the actual Nether Tempest up, Nether Tempest does more damage. If it's like the one fight that I had where Nether Tempest did less damage than Mark of Luneth, it's probably because I forgot to put Nether Tempest up there. But Arcane Blast and Missiles is the primary source of damage. You can see they're not equal, but they're close enough to be called that. So, but it gives an idea. You can also see the Touch of the Magi doesn't have a huge amount of damage on there. But granted, quite frankly, if I'm dealing a single boss fight, which one's going to give me more benefit? Touch of the Magi or Arcane Rebound? In a single boss fight, Touch of the Magi is giving me more. So, but yeah, no, that's pretty much where I stand. I hope that this little bit of a guide here helps out. I'm sure there's probably something I'm missing. Just to make note of it real quick, the food that I had on was 225 Mastery, and I had one of the old school Draenic 250 Intels, because the new flats are just a smidge expensive right now, and I don't quite have a lot of materials to go ahead and just kind of play with one of those for during this session. Do note, this doesn't factor in any type of haste increases like time warp or heroism, so those are going to be at the whim of your actual experiences out in the world. Otherwise, I think that kind of covers everything there. Again, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I am open to all kinds of whispers and everything like that. My battle tag there, I have it on the forums. You can reach out to me at that point. I'll be glad to work with you and help you out. Obviously, I'm not perfect at this. I don't know when that is. So if anyone found this useful, let me know. If there's something you want to add in, throw it on the forums after the post I make that has this in it. Let me know what I need to add in, and I'll make some updates. Alright? But with that, I'm going to end the video. Thank you very much, and you all take care.